Hello, Aidan, and hello, everyone. I'm just a second. We are live on all the channels. Thanks for joining us at Ecommerce Growth Show. Today we have a special episode with Aidan Corbett, which is the CEO of Wayflyer. Aidan, thanks a lot for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Valentin.
Great. So let me first announce our audience what we're aiming to discuss about. So one topic would be maximizing growth despite the cash constraints, which I think is a burden that almost all the e-commerce managers have these days. The second topic, why direct-to-consumer brands need to stop acquiring customers and at a third of their AOV and start thinking about the ratio between the customer acquisition cost and lifetime value. And the third is understanding why direct-to-consumer brands funds are shrinking while D2C business is exploding. So Aidan, thanks for joining us. And the first question that I'm asking all our guests is how you first got into the e-commerce landscape.
Well, the first way I got into the e-commerce landscape was through a previous company that I started called Conjura. And in Conjura, we did marketing analytics solutions for e-commerce. And Wayflyer is really a evolution of that idea, where we use the same marketing analytics, but instead of just providing analytics and charging for analytics, we're actually using it to advance cash to e-commerce businesses. So I come from an analytics background.
Perfect. So what about the analytics? Do you think analytics, it's, data-driven companies are actually there, or is just, let's say, a status that they are trying to achieve?
I think the hardest thing about analytics, particularly for e-commerce companies, is that it's really difficult and it's always just part of your job. So when you're starting off an e-commerce business, and we serve mostly small e-commerce businesses, it's a full-time job that you can only dedicate a couple of hours a week to. So what we try and do is really create another employee, if you want, who helps you extract data from all the different platforms, clean it, join it, format it, so that you can really understand what's going on and see through all of the data and the reports that these platforms are giving you. So it's a hard challenge for large businesses. It's a really hard challenge for small businesses, just given the time constraints. And as I said, we're just looking to give you an additional employee so that you can essentially, get better at, get through the analytics in a much more efficient way.
Yeah, I've been an entrepreneur in the e-commerce landscape as well, and I do recall those moments when I was juggling with all these tasks at the same time. And if I am to look behind in the 10 years before, the biggest challenge was the prioritization. So
exactly.
It's like in the math, right? If you do the right operations, but not at the right, let's say, moment, right, in the right order, you're not getting the right answer. So I think what is crucially important is to pick your own battles and to disregard things which are not important. Unfortunately, there aren't too many people which you can rely on in terms of let's say grabbing the insights from the data. There are a lot of people that are let's say positioning themselves as specialists, but they are specialists at getting your money and spending them on various acquisition channels, and I think that's one of the most important challenges that entrepreneurs should overcome. And in order to do that, I think your business model is quite intriguing, and if you can let us understand how it works, that would be amazing.
Sure. So we find that e-commerce businesses have two big challenges. The first challenge is, how do I deploy my marketing spend? And the second challenge is, how do I get the capital that will fund my growth, primarily in marketing spend? And we really combine those solutions to those two problems. So our customers share data with us from their ad platforms, their website, but also from their e-commerce store. We take all of that data, we predict their sales over the next 3 months, and then we also give them tips to help them optimize spend. And essentially then we give them the money over typically a 3 to 6 month period, and we work with them during that period to optimize their spend. sales. So you really have two ways of growing with Wayflyer. We help you optimize your marketing spend, and then we also give you money to spend. So we're really putting our money where our mouth is. When we think that you have the opportunity to grow, we help you do it, and then we give you money to do it as well.
That sounds appealing. So how can you do this? So that means your team should be, let's say, really efficient in spending money. So mainly, what qualifies you to do this? Do you have prior experience into this, or how can we make this work?
So it works in two different ways. So because we have so many customers on our platform, we have access to huge amounts of data. And what that allows us to do is give really powerful recommendations that are not just based off your individual data, but based off all of the trends that we see across the market. So compared to the average e-commerce entrepreneur, we actually have access to huge amounts of data that help us understand the trends that are actually taking place in the market right now. So the first of all, it's just access to data gives us an advantage. And then in the second way, we have teams of data scientists and engineers. And what they do is they live in the APIs that give you data from Facebook ads, from Google ads, from Google Analytics. And so what we're really doing is surfacing a lot of the data that's available within those platforms that the average entrepreneur or small team are not going to use, because to be honest, it's too hard to access, and it's typically not available through the applications that you would use on the website. So we're getting access to data using the APIs, and then we're also getting learnings from all of the data that we're seeing. And that's really an advantage that most small e-commerce companies wouldn't have.
Yeah, that makes sense. From your perspective, what is the, let's say, the most important thing that the e-commerce companies should do nowadays, as they are experiencing a large demand, they are acquiring customers, but what should they do in order to keep them? And I'm tapping this into the topic of customer value optimization and lifetime value as well.
Sure. So there's a lot of things that they can do, but as we said earlier, prioritization is key. So if I was going to give one tip, it would be email personalization. So when you have a customer's email address, don't blanket bomb everybody with the exact same promotional email. Personalization based on the channel, based on location, based on previous payments or previous purchases. That's a really, if I had one tip to give, it would be email personalization. We've seen it create huge amounts of growth without a huge amount of cost. And there's a lot of tools out there that can help you do that, obviously.
Yeah. In terms of the, let's say, the education of the e-commerce managers and e-commerce owners, I unfortunately there's this distribution, asymptotical distribution. Like most of them are looking at customer acquisition without, let's say, without understanding that they are acquiring customers. They are not just acquiring orders, or they are having the cost per conversion. So cost per conversion, I think, is really, say, toxic in the because this is affecting the mindset of the e-commerce owners, so that they are not looking at individuals. They are not realizing that their costs are not for orders. They are paying to acquire customers, which means customers that could have multiple orders and that could have a lifetime value. So this ratio between the lifetime value and customer acquisition cost is not something that it's let's say, too obvious for e-commerce entrepreneurs. A lot of software as a service companies are looking at this ratio, but most of the e-commerce owners are not even monitoring it. Not to so you can't improve something that you don't measure, right? Why do you think this is happening in this landscape?
I think because it's actually quite hard to do it well. So technically speaking, it's quite difficult, especially if you don't have a big technical team, to marry your cost of acquiring a customer with your lifetime value. Because what it requires you to do is capture all of the payments that you're making on Google Ads, on Facebook, using some attribution model that's quite accurate, and then mapping that to all the subsequent payments that are happening that you're probably capturing through Shopify. So that's actually quite a difficult technical challenge to do. We do help our customers do that. What's also challenging is it's hard to know what your LTV is going to be when you acquire a customer. So unless you want to wait 12 months to figure out what the LTV is going to be over that period, you need to have some kind of a lead scoring or customer scoring in place that you can assign an LTV to a customer within a short enough time range from when you've acquired that customer. So unfortunately, it's technically difficult to do, particularly, as I said, without a big engineering team or data science team behind you. I think that's one of the challenges that a lot of e-commerce companies face.
Yeah, fortunately, this is something that we're on a path to solve as our next product is actually directly integrated with Shopify and grabbing all this data so that the entrepreneurs will be able to actually monitor and improve these metrics. But
it's going to be very valuable. It's going to be great.
As any, let's say, courageous endeavor, the most important thing, the most important fight is in the mind, right? So the mindset of entrepreneurs that should first realize that this is important, and second, do something about it. Because I've seen, and maybe you can let me understand your perspective on this as well. I've seen a lot of companies that are having a huge potential, but unfortunately the habits, the old habits, are there. So mainly they are not changing, and they are not making the level up to the next chapter of their vision, not due to the lack of potential, but due to the lack of internal alignment and changing the habits, how the purchasing manager is doing stuff, how the marketing team is doing stuff. So there is this disconnection, and as the companies are growing, they have these silos which are separately and they are not aligning. So let's say those team buildings that, by the way, this can't happen anymore due to COVID. So only at these team buildings they are able to get in sync and actually, okay, let's understand what's going on, and let's think how can we improve the game. What's your take on this, Aidan?
I think particularly for e-com companies, there is a alignment challenge when you want to make a change. So if you want to bring in new products, that means you need new marketing campaigns. If you want to sell across new channels, if you want to bundle products, all of those activities are normally performed by multiple functions for them to stay aligned. I also think change is difficult because normally means I'm putting money somewhere new. So I'm spending money on new products. I'm going to experiment with a new marketing channel. And for companies that are typically bootstrapped, and most of our customers are bootstrapped, that's pretty risky. It's tough taking money away from something that you know has been working for a long period of time and putting it somewhere new. And that's one of the advantages of using Wayflyer, is that it gives you some of that financial freedom to try something new. I think that encourages some experimentation amongst our customers. And marketing, as you know, is all about experimentation. It's trying lots of things. And then when you find out something works, you don't tell anybody, and then you just spend all your money on that thing. So I think the challenge of experimentation, having the freedom and the confidence to do that, it's tough, especially as a bootstrapped entrepreneur. And that's one of the advantages of Wayflyer's product.
Okay, so to sum up on this topic of growth despite the cash constraints, Aidan, what you're proposing is for companies and entrepreneurs which are bootstrapped to get in touch with you so that you can, I think you make an analysis around their potential, and then you are co-investing with them. You come up with the sweat and know-how to actually help them acquire more customers. Is that right?
That's it.
Perfect. But that sounds too good to be true, to be honest. So
all good products are too good to be true, Valentin.
Yeah. So moving forward on the next topic, what do you think is the let's say the top 3 things that you would suggest to companies trying to diminish this ratio of CAC versus LTV?
So the first thing that I'd want to do, and we help companies with this, is get your data into a state that you begin to believe. So one of the challenges that you'll have, and I know OmniConvert helps with this, is conflicting data sources. So Google tells you one thing, Facebook tells you something else, Google Analytics tells you something else, and then Shopify gives you what's actually in the bank account. So one thing that I would do is really focus on getting that one single source of truth from a data perspective, so that everybody in the company is aligned and they also believe the data. Because when you do that, you suddenly get confidence to start making investment decisions in new products, in new marketing campaigns. It's hard to get that confidence until you have really trust in the data that you're capturing. So that's the first thing that I do. The second thing that I would do, as I mentioned earlier on, is really focus on email personalization. It's not that hard. There's a lot of off-the-shelf tools that can help with that particular task, and it has a really quick payback period. What we see a lot in our companies is an underinvestment in email. So they're really good at acquiring businesses. They do end up getting repeat purchases, but for some reason, email is only bringing 10% of those repeat purchases when it could be 60 or 70%. And then the last, and I have one more, and that would just be really get Facebook working. Facebook scales so well compared to Google for e-com customers. So I would focus a lot of attention on Facebook and Instagram.
So Aidan, in terms of this distribution between the channels, it's quite surprising to understand. Do you think it's doable to have 60 to 70% of the total revenue coming from email?
Repeat revenue. So that would be the second, third, fourth purchase coming from email. We see that with customers who are really, really good at email. And oftentimes when you look at it, it's really down to the conversion rate. So if you do send everybody in your CRM the same email, you're not going to get a lot of revenue. But if you actually look back through the data and use that for personalization, it can really drive the majority of your subsequent sales. And it works really well, particularly if you've got an array of products that encourage repeat purchases, which is why health and beauty tends to have quite high LTV, because people buy those products repeatedly. Something like furniture, not so much. And in that case, when you have a high average order value, you'll probably want to be profitable off the first transaction, and repeat purchases isn't going to work as well. But for those sectors where you do have a lot of repeat purchases, email can work incredibly well. And it's cheap, obviously, compared to paid channels.
Yeah, actually, that's why we've integrated with Klaviyo, and we have other integrations on the way as well. I think I remember that from my previous e-commerce. Actually, we've got the direct traffic. We had the email, and then we've got the organic, and then we have the paid channels. Unfortunately, this mix, I mean, the maturity levels of the e-commerce managers, let's say, are not there. So they are starting with paid channels, which is great because they validate that these are the products, this is the pricing, these are the messaging, but then they continue to go on the paid channels without understanding that the paid channels are there only to build your list, to first to validate, and then to build your initial list, and because customers are first buying your marketing, and then if they are not buying your product at the second, third purchase, you have a problem. So you should stop acquiring customers unless the customers are not placing the second, third, and fourth order.
Absolutely.
I also wanted to emphasize something with you, Aidan. We've looked at the patterns of what are the chances for a customer to place the second, third, fourth, fifth order, and this is always going up. I mean, always. We haven't seen any company that hasn't got this pattern. And there's another pattern that after the third order, the chances for a customer to place the next order are twice than after the first one. So that means going from first to second, or going from the third to fourth. This is the moment. I mean, these are the first touch points, let's say. And I think this should work more like the app developers are improving their onboarding, right? Because they have this retention curve that they are hypnotized about, and they are obsessed, and they do a lot of tweaks so that users are sticking with their app, because they know that once the habit is there and the share of wallet of their products for those customers is going up. Unfortunately, I haven't seen any kind of research made on that. Do you look at this kind of data for your customers as well?
Absolutely. And actually, in actual fact, when Amazon was growing, one of the big KPIs that they had was number of customers who had made 3 purchases, because they knew that after a customer had made 3 purchases, they were hooked. So I think one of the ways in which e-com companies, especially businesses that are relying on repeat purchases, is to use the number of customers who've made 3 purchases as one of their KPIs, and not just cost of customer acquisition or number of new customers, but actually number of customers who have made more than 3. And in larger retailers, what you actually find is these are actually 2 separate teams. So you'll have one team typically called marketing, and they're in charge of acquiring new customers. And then you'll have a separate team called typically CRM, and all they're focused on is typically sending out emails to maximize that LTV. But having another KPI that means you're getting customers with more than 2 or 3 purchases, or you're convinced that they're long term, it's a great KPI to have for a business, and it does change the focus within the team.
Yeah, one, let's say, kind of explore. Let's explore a bit here, Aidan. Do you think then customer acquisition costs shouldn't rely on all the customers that placed 1 order, but maybe all the customers that placed 3 orders, on following this reasoning from you?
I think so. The only challenge is, depending on your business, you might need to wait a long time to figure out, will they make 3 orders? So so there needs to be a little bit of kind of customization based on your business model. But if somebody is typically going to make 3 orders within a 4-week period, then that's a great KPI. If it's very seasonal, for example, if somebody's buying school books, or if you're a gifting site, you may need to wait a longer period of time to get those 3 purchases in. And in that scenario, you're probably going to need to be a little more creative on the KPI that you use. But anything to signify I've acquired a valuable customer and not just any customer is going to help you out in the long term.
So moving further, Aidan, in terms of the direct to consumer, what is your take on this reality, actually, that the funding is shrinking while the revenues are going up?
I think it's a fantastic space for bootstrapped entrepreneurs once they reach a certain scale. So I think the challenge when you're doing D2C or e-commerce is you have an ability to scale a business without having a lot of staff, but it's difficult at the beginning given the cash flow profile of D2C. Because when you design the product, you then need to pay for the inventory, then you receive the inventory, then you got to pay for marketing, and only then do you get the revenue. So you got to spend a lot of money before you see any revenue. And that happens all the time, because then you make your revenue and then you buy more inventory. So if you're in a position where you're scaling quickly, accessing funding just gives you an incredible acceleration. And that doesn't need to be funding that basically takes your equity. And that's really what Wayflyer is all about. It's about providing you with financing that allows you to quickly scale while keeping ownership of your business. And it's difficult for banks to fund D2C businesses because they don't have a lot of assets. VCs aren't really funding a lot of D2C at the moment. So there is a gap in this, but once founders can really get to scale, e-commerce businesses are amazing because you don't have a lot of staff and you can scale incredibly quickly with quite a small team. It's just initially the financing challenge is tough.
Yeah, that's true. And one more aspect that should be we should look at is the fact that the e-commerce companies also have low access to talented people, because as you are a startup, you can't access talented people which are working for such and such multinational or whatever. or they prefer to work within an agency where they have colleagues like they are, so they form like a squad and they are happy about it. So there's also this let's say barrier for an e-commerce manager to be able, not having enough funds to attract talented people and not giving them enough budget so that he can play with acquisition and he can feel that he's actually experimenting.
Yeah, I think there's ways around that. So unfortunately, all startups, and you know this, Valentin, all startups deal with trying to compete with large companies to acquire talent. And one of the real kind of challenges in being an entrepreneur is finding undiscovered talent. So talent that the market isn't valuing. That's one of the key challenges of being an entrepreneur. So that's just going to be tough for everybody doing a startup. It's hard to compete with salaries. With the big guys. So one of the ways around that is giving younger people in particular a lot of ownership. So you might not be able to pay the same rate to a young marketer that they may get in an agency or they may get in a bigger company, but you could give them a lot more ownership. So they're actually making decisions at a very high level, even though they're quite inexperienced. And that can actually be a really worthwhile trade-off for somebody at the early stages of their career. So there are things that you can do. Other things are, for example, equity compensation, but there are ways in which you can make the roles really attractive to people and try and get over that salary issue, because it's always tough competing against people who have more money, but that's the essence of entrepreneurship.
Yeah, that's true. In terms of the, let's say, future, what do you think is going to be the future of retail now that we've seen this fantastic growth, and we have the DNVBs which are starting off, then they had problem like Casper and others as well with the let's say payback period over the acquisition cost. Where do you think the market is going from your perspective?
So I think the D2C is going to continue to grow. I think what's happened with COVID-19 is you've basically taken a big proportion of the population who are still not buying online, and you forced them to buy online. And so they've now got that learned behavior. I'm sure some people will go back to the high street, but you do have people, for example, like my parents, who would never have bought online before, but now they are buying online because COVID forced them to do so. So I think D2C is only going to grow. I do think high street brands are going to struggle. I think it's going to be difficult for them unless they make the transition online. It's harder for them to make the transition online because a lot of their cost base, a lot of their experience is working in the high street. So there's a real opportunity for D2C brands to continue to grow really quickly. I think, to be honest, the market and the number of people who are likely to use them is only going to go up. The bigger challenge, obviously, is how are you going to compete against Walmart and Amazon and maintain your own channel to the customer? In Europe, that isn't as big an issue as it is in the US. So in the US, our customers tend to rely on Amazon a lot more than they do in Europe. Yeah. That for me is probably a bigger challenge than competing with the high street brands.
Yeah, and in terms of this let's say battle between Shopify and Amazon, we've seen now Shopify secured this partnership with Walmart. Then Walmart declared that they are looking for 1,200 sellers to get into their marketplace, and then they got all these technical issues. So do you think this battle is for real, or is completely let's say disproportionate battle?
I'm not sure. I think Shopify has done amazingly well, and I think it'll continue to do really well. I think when you're starting up, it's kind of the no-brainer. It's a bit like if you're starting up a software startup, you use Stripe for payments. If you're starting D2C, you use Shopify. I think it's going to continue to grow. I'm excited by their collaboration with Facebook. I think that just removes another step in the process of actually selling a product. To be honest, I think they'll all grow together. I can't see it being a kind of a fight. I think they're going to be complementary. What will be interesting to see is, and we can see it hopefully in the data that we capture from customers, is how the split between Amazon and Shopify is going to change over time within individual customers. Sometimes it's 50-50, sometimes it's 90-10, sometimes it's 100-0. I'm interested to see how that develops over time, because obviously there's a huge advantage in having your customer information and having a direct relationship with the customer. As we discussed earlier, that's how you grow LTV.
Yeah. On the other hand, you don't have this acquisition cost because Amazon provides you with the demand. And I think a good strategy is to stay just as much on Amazon until you nail down the product itself and the process, the packaging, and after that you should get on the hard road of going alone.
The hard road.
Yeah. Okay, so Aidan, in terms of the, let's say, machine learning and e-commerce, there are these, let's say, it was that hype in the last, I don't know, 2 years around AI. We haven't seen too many stories popping up around. Okay, we've used machine learning, and then, ta-da! We had to let go 40% of our stuff because it was made completely automatically. But I've seen a nice take from someone from Microsoft that stated that we are still in the agrarian age of AI, and we'll see the electrification of marketing at some point. Like we have all these, let's say, myriads of software companies doing this component, and for merchants, it's quite, let's say, challenging to decide how to put these puzzles together, and then how to do the data hygiene and how to ingest it into another third party that could reveal some anomalies that could be used by another software product, and so on. So the vision here is that in the future, maybe we'll have, let's say, an integrated approach, and Shopify or another player could be the one actually ingesting all the data, acquiring all the apps, and providing all these, let's say, integrated services to generate demand automatically. And the battle will be on the customer experience itself, not into the acquisition part.
Yeah, I think the challenge is, certainly from a machine learning perspective, is we keep bringing new tools into our stack. So if we all used the exact same technology stack, it would be quite quickly we'd be able to create that single view of the customer that would look at the whole life cycle, and you would have all the data in place. But we keep bringing in new tools. We keep bringing in tools like Klaviyo, we keep bringing in tools like OmniConvert, we keep bringing in tools like, different marketing channels keep popping up. And that means that the data challenge and the need to do that data hygiene and the need to continually manually process data never really goes away. And if anything, it's probably getting worse. So if you look at larger companies, they're buying a lot more from a lot more vendors than they were 10, 15 years ago. So that data challenge, I can't see that data challenge of where you're integrating all the data sources and getting full visibility. I don't think that's going to go away. And I actually think if you can crack it, that gives you a big competitive advantage. So I can't see there being one monolithic solution for everything. There's certainly quite a lot of apps in the case of Shopify that will plug into Shopify, and that removes some of the data challenge, but certainly not all of it. And I still think having clarity and transparency on your data and confidence in making decisions off the back of it is still going to be a big competitive advantage 5-10 years from now.
Okay. Aidan, you have access to a lot of data. Tell us some, let's say, some winners that you've seen after this COVID period. If you have any example or success story that you could share with us.
Sure. So I may not be able to mention the company's name, but we've one company that sells sports apparel, and they had an amazing period pretty much from the beginning of COVID-19 right up to today, where I think sales probably gone up 250% over last year. And the main reason was when COVID-19 happened, CPMs on Facebook fell away. and they spotted this really quickly. They realized that their cost of acquiring a customer halved, and as a consequence, they really doubled down on spending in Facebook. And we were lucky enough to spot this with them and begin to fund them their spend on Facebook. And that really drove kind of incredible growth over the last 3 months. Unfortunately, Facebook CPMs are beginning to get back up to the levels they were at pre-COVID, but there was a period where it was just really cheap to acquire customers on Facebook, and we were basically recommending this strategy to any e-commerce company that was on our platform at the time. One of the things that we do see, and it's quite interesting, is that European e-commerce companies use Google way more than US companies do. So when US e-commerce companies and D2C brands are selling online, the US brands tend to use Facebook much, much more. And I think that's probably because they're bringing a little bit more sophistication to it. We all know that it's difficult to scale on Google once you've taken the low-hanging fruit, but having a real sophistication in Facebook, especially for small e-commerce businesses, that is a real competitive advantage. And this company had that in spades. They had a ROAS of about 8 or 9x probably on individual Facebook campaigns on the first purchase. Now the challenge is monetizing those for a higher LTV.
Yeah. In terms of other platforms, how do you see these newcomers like TikTok or Snapchat or I don't know, even Quora for certain niches?
I'm really passionate about companies experimenting with new channels, but nobody seems to do so. So when you look at our customers' advertising budget, everything is on Google and Facebook. And sometimes there's some affiliates. There might be one or two little experiments, but what we are finding is that it's the larger brands that are on Snap, TikTok, Pinterest. The smaller brands stick to Facebook, Instagram, and Google Ads. I think experimentation is really good. I understand it's hard to do it when you're cash constrained, but the only real way to outperform is to find distribution channels where other people are not. So if you do see a channel where there is a lot of traffic and a lot of your competitors are not there, it's always worth experimenting. But as I said, when you look at the data, everyone uses Google Ads and Facebook, Instagram all the time.
Yeah, sadly, that's true. But as in, I don't know, discovering other territories, it was the same. The most courageous that
totally
went far away, they came back with the treasures, right?
Absolutely.
Aidan, in terms of the growth, as we are looking for growth for e-commerce, we are also looking at let's say us as individuals. Tell us some hacks that you are using in your own life for inner growth.
Okay, so one of the things I'm very passionate about for myself and for people in the company is to get time on your own every week. So what we try and do is we have no meetings in the mornings. So I try and schedule all my meetings after 2 p.m. in the day. And what that allows me to do is get 3-4 hours in the morning to do some deep work. And that translates right across the company. So Mondays and Fridays, we have some morning meetings, but Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday in the mornings, most people will have a free calendar, and that's time when they get deep work done. And if you split it in the day, and that becomes a habit where you have a distinct block of hours, it works really well. And that's worked really well for me over the last 2 years. And as I said, we rolled it out company-wide, and I'd encourage a lot of people to do it. I think Paul Graham has a blog post called Manage Your Time and Make Your Time, and it really addresses this issue, splitting your day into time and meetings, and then the rest of the day when you're uninterrupted and getting deep work done. So that's probably the biggest hack I can recommend.
Okay, great. So Aidan, any question that I haven't been, let's say, inspired enough to?
No, I think we've covered. I think you've asked me some really interesting questions. I think, as I mentioned earlier, the reason that I love e-commerce is its ability to scale quickly. And if you're an ambitious founder and you're passionate about brands, you do have the ability to create a multi-million-dollar business really quickly without actually spending a lot of money. So it's just it's a really exciting space for us to be in. What we see today are companies that might have taken an advance of 50,000 in May are now coming back and taking a 350,000 advance because they're growing so quickly. That opportunity is out there, and Wayflyer is designed to help you do that. So we'll take a look at your data. We'll see where you can optimize your marketing spend, and if it's profitable and it's growing, we'll give you the money to grow faster.
Okay, makes sense. So we've got today Aidan from Wayflyer. Check their website. And where can people reach out to you, Aidan, if they want to connect with you?
So my email address is aidan@wayflyer.com. That's the best place to get me.
Okay, perfect. And for you out there, don't forget to reconnect next week at the same hour. And I have one important thing to announce you that next week on the 24th, we are officially launching Reveal. And the good news for anyone which is on Shopify is that we've decided to get rid of all the barriers. So mainly you'll be able to use our product for the whole year completely free. You just need to plug it in on the Shopify app itself, and then voila, you have access to cohort analytics, you have access to lifetime value tracking, you have RFM segmentation for all your customers, and you also be able to plug it in with Klaviyo or do website personalization with OmniConvert as well. So that being said, Aidan, thanks a lot for being part
Thank you, Valentin.
Growth Show, and for you that are watching us, we'll see each other next time or on the 24th.